Hi, so welcome to Historical Fiction with Kviatoslav. And in this series, I like to talk about works of historical fiction, particularly from the 20th century, because I think basically things written in the 20th century, they're probably much better than anything that's written in these days now for a number of reasons. But for this one, I wanted to call attention to a novel that I hadn't heard of until I found it in a secondhand shop in London last year. And this is called Count Belisarius by Robert Graves. If that name is familiar to you, then you probably know it from he wrote one of the seminal pieces of historical fiction from the early 20th century, which is I, Claudius, there, an account of the family of Claudius and before he became emperor and so on. So I have read that book. I don't have a copy of it, but I've read it and enjoyed it very much. Excuse me. But this one I had never heard of there, and was quite happy to find out that there was a book, another book written by Robert Graves on a historical subject. And yeah, this is one I would actually quite recommend. It was written in about 1938, I would say, if I recall, which was a little bit after he wrote I, Claudius, and it actually covers a really interesting subject. If you recognize the name Belisarius, then he was actually a Byzantine general in the 6th century, and he's quite famous as one of probably the greatest generals in history, but he doesn't receive a lot of credit. And I think this one, it's really well done because it covers an area of history and a topic which is not really covered very often in historical fiction, the Byzantine Empire and the 6th century there. Excuse me. And Belisarius is a really interesting subject because he was a great general under Justinian and Theodosia, who was a famous emperor of Byzantine times. And basically this one, it's told by his wife's eunuch slave, who kind of accompanies his wife and Belisarius on most of his campaigns. And he spent a lot of time in North Africa, in the Vandal kingdom, and in the Lombard kingdoms in Italy and so on there. And overall, I think he does a really good job with this one. I think it's probably not quite as interesting as I, Claudius, but I would still recommend it, particularly if you're interested in the time period. And I think the Belisarius as the character, he's a really interesting study in a character in that he's an extremely well-accomplished general, but he has absolutely no kind of personal ambition at all. And because of that, he, in some ways, suffers because everyone thinks that he should be ambitious, particularly Justinian, who he serves and serves very loyally. And for his loyal service, Justinian is constantly mistreating him. And you really just see this kind of dynamic of what can happen to a person if they don't actually have ambition when they have ability there. And overall, I mean, I don't know, I can't vouch for how exactly accurate it is, but I know that Robert Graves was generally quite good with his history there. And I didn't see anything, there were no glaring errors. You know, obviously I'm not an expert on Belisarius or Byzantine history, but overall, I would give it a recommend. I'd say if you can get your hands on it. I said not quite up to the I, Claudius level, but what is really. Yeah, this is Count Belisarius by Robert Graves. I would recommend giving it a go if you can find a copy. Thanks.